Joining me as we canter around the latest news from Brussels, Strasbourg and the EU are the Conservative MEP, Anthea McIntyre, and the UKIP MEP, Jonathan Arnott. Welcome to both of you. Well, debates over security have dominated discussions in Strasbourg this week, where the European Parliament has been meeting for its monthly plenary session. On Wednesday, EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker warned that the heightened security atmosphere, as well as the ongoing migration crisis, were threatening the very foundations of the EU. How seriously would you say Schengen is now under threat?
Well, I think we have to recognise that Schengen already made provisions for closing borders in times of crisis. So to an extent, it has already been anticipated. I think the more important thing is ensuring that the external borders are secure, because that's really what Schengen relies on. So I think the effort should be strengthening the external borders, but then it would succeed.
But the Dutch Prime Minister has been telling us that measures agreed by the EU to control the external borders of the EU have not been implemented by the southern European countries, where most of the migrants are coming in.
And that is hugely worrying. I mean, obviously, the UK is outside of Schengen, so we control our borders, which is very important. But I think, nevertheless, we benefit from strengthened borders on the external frontiers of Europe.
Do you buy this link that Jean-Claude Juncker is raising between if Schengen goes, the euro goes?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the idea that when you have to, say, show your passport at a border, that impacts upon the whole economy of the euro, it seems to me that Juncker is trying precisely the same kind of scaremongering that he tries when he tells Britain that we shouldn't be leaving the European Union.
What do you say to that?
I think that the Eurozone requires probably closer union, which is precisely why we don't want to be part of it. So
but that's not going to happen this side of the German or the French elections in 2017.
Indeed. I think it's very much in our interests that the Eurozone survives, but I think it's equally important that we stay out of it, because we want to have proper political control and not have, as in the words of Prime Minister, this we don't want ever closer union. So that is why it's important to maintain the difference between the Eurozone countries and the non-Eurozone and make sure that we have fair position outside of the Euro.
You must take some comfort from the rather dramatic warnings of the European establishment about the future of Europe. We've heard from Jean-Claude Juncker saying that not just Schengen, but the euro could now be under threat. The Dutch Prime Minister has been comparing the current state of Europe to the last days of the Roman Empire. If they don't get things together, you begin to feel that you're pushing at an open door here.
Well, certainly there are reasons for supposing that Britain would be a lot better outside the European Union. There are certainly reasons for supposing that the European Union is in a certain amount of trouble. I suspect that what Juncker is trying to do is he's trying to foster a certain unity amongst those EU countries. So he scaremongers about the euro because he thinks that some countries which are in favour of the euro will panic if they think bring back passport control would somehow lead to leaving the euro. So I think in some ways he's using it as a threat. He's overplaying it rather than downplaying it to those countries, and then at the same time saying to Britain something very different. And you know, you mentioned the words ever closer union. The problem is that those words don't really have any legal force in the treaties. Yes, of course, Cameron can go away and negotiate a change in those words, but it won't make the slightest bit of difference to the actual situation within the European Union. What we're getting from Cameron is window dressing rather than actual change. If Cameron wanted to change the EU, he'd ask for real changes.
Hold on, we'll come on to it. But isn't the problem for those who want to stay in is that this referendum could well take place at a time when Europe is seen to be in something of a crisis, and where even leading Europeans who believe in the European project, from the President of the Commission to the President of the Council to the Prime Minister of Holland, are beginning to fear for its future?
I think it just highlights the need for reform. And we've seen this week that ministers from 27 different ministers from 19 different countries are saying we've got to have reform and reduce the administrative burdens.
Well, I've never heard that before.
They want targets for burden reduction, and it's not just us. So often we're saying it's just the UK.
But when's it going? Is it going to happen in time for the referendum?
I believe it will.
You do?
Yes, I do.
The UK government has warned that uncontrolled migration could force Britain to leave the EU. The warning came as new figures showed net inward migration to the EU had reached an all-time high, with net migration from the rest of Europe also hitting a new record. Controlling immigration is the really substantive issue at the heart of Britain's renegotiation of its membership of the EU. When would you like the referendum? Would you like the referendum sooner rather than later? In other words, in 2016 rather than 2017?
I'm happy that we have it before the end of 2017, provided we've...
Well, you have to have it before then.
Absolutely. I want it when we've done some negotiating. So people that say that we're not asking for anything, well, obviously we are, because there's a lot of negotiating to go on. When we've concluded it, that is the time to have the referendum.
So do you accept that it's unlikely this will be wound up in the December summit, that it's going to go in to 2016?
I think it's quite likely, but you never know. Where there's a will, there's a way, and I think there is a great desire to satisfy some of Britain's demands as soon as possible. And as I say, if you've got 20-odd member states saying we've got to reduce the burden of red tape, that's a very good start.
But my understanding is that part of the British problem is getting the Europeans' attention, because they have so many other issues that they regard as being more important. Security, clearly, after Paris, a major one, and after what's been happening in Brussels as well. And then there is an unresolved migration crisis as well. 850,000 migrants have come into the European Union in the course of this year so far. And so getting the British renegotiation demands up the agenda when so much else is at stake is difficult.
Absolutely, and of course this in itself to me is the government's fault, because we've had 40 years of attempted reform of the European Union, which hasn't happened from successive Conservative and Labour governments. David Cameron came to power on a promise that he would renegotiate the terms of entry into the European Union. That was 5.5 years ago. He could have done that at a much quieter time. He could have been getting on with it, but actually what happens is he waits around 5.5 years, presents this letter of demands that doesn't ask for anything that the British people actually want, for UK law to be supreme over EU law, for actual controls over the free movement of workers, so that we have a right to decide who comes into our country and who doesn't come into our country. Okay. Whether it's something on the finances, there's just nothing of any real substance. The benefits issue is just tinkering around the edges.
Oh, no, it isn't. I think it's very much a question of fairness, and I think that's the most important thing for the British people. And it seems perfectly reasonable to me that people should come and work and contribute to the economy through their taxes before they benefit.
Right, that may be a fair principle.
But you want anyone to come.
But hold on. Do you seriously think that would do much for EU migration, except perhaps at the edges? What's the evidence for that?
Don't forget that we actually welcome a certain amount of EU migration. If you look at the people that run our hospitals, you look at the people that pick our fruit, if it was for no immigration,
but my question to you is, even if Mr Cameron gets what he's asking for, will it really reduce EU migration numbers by very much?
I think it will certainly reduce the ones that see the advantages of Britain and think that if they come, they'll be looked after. So we want the ones that will contribute, and those are the ones we're going to get.
But surely the numbers won't go down, because the Conservative government in this country is, for other reasons, putting the national minimum wage up to £9. That's 2 or 3 times what the minimum wage could be, or what you could hope to earn in places like Romania or Bulgaria, even if you take away their welfare payments. Naturally, they're going to come to a place where they can get a job and a decent minimum wage, aren't they?
Don't forget, we are victims of our own success. That we've seen growth, we've seen increasing wages, we've seen unemployment going down. We've got more people employed in this country than ever.
Sure.
So obviously we are attractive. And it's fine to be attractive to people who want to come and have a job. We have 700,000 job vacancies. So we need people.
So you're arguing the case for open borders and not changing anything?
No, I'm saying that I'm in favour of freedom of movement to come and work. What I'm not in favour of is people being able to come simply to claim benefit.
What do you say?
But surely you must understand this is what is leading to wage compression in poorer communities in the UK, where you've got a massive oversupply of unskilled labour, people coming into the UK happy to do jobs on minimum wage and driving wages down. People have previously been able to command a wage of £10, £15 an hour. Now it's down. Now there are people who are struggling to get jobs on minimum wage.
The economic evidence for that
80 pence an hour is the minimum.
The economic evidence for it kind of intuitively makes sense. If you increase the supply of labour, then wages, particularly at the lower end, will fall. Quite hard to get real hard economic evidence for that.
Wage growth is at about 3% now,
and
is
real
faster than
wages are rising about 3%.
Exactly.
I would say two things. Firstly, come to my constituency in the northeast of England and talk to people who are saying exactly that is the problem. Secondly, my understanding is that for every 1% increase in population as a result of migration, that you're talking about something in the region of a 0.5% wage drop for the poorest 5% in society, and that is something which is
how big has immigration been into the northeast?
It is rising. We have.
But how big has it been?
Well, we have the census figures from 2011, which show that at that time it was the lowest in the country. But it's also, when you then look later on and you look from that point, it seems that we're having the biggest increase compared with the number of migrants here already. But we also have the highest unemployment. So a small increase in migration in the northeast has a disproportionate impact.
Okay,
Slightly different from the rest of the country in terms of... Yeah.
Thank you. Is there much of an appetite for Turkey to have a much closer relationship with the EU?
I can't see it at the moment. I don't think there's any appetite for enlargement. I mean, obviously, they're part of NATO, and I think it's reasonable to maintain relations, sort of encourage them in the right direction, but I honestly can't see them joining Europe.
What's your view?
I can't see it happening at the moment, but it does say something about Cameron's political judgment that him and the Conservative Party have always been in favour of Turkey joining, and the free movement of workers that would inevitably entail, even if there were restrictions for a small period of time.
Are you in favour of Turkey joining? Is that the party policy?
Not as far as I know. The idea that they are in NATO and should be encouraged sort of along the path towards us rather than pushing them away, I think is very important, but there's no promise.
All right.